Hello, CSET Social Studies students. It is December 2008. This is David Goyette, your instructor for the CSET prep course with National University. I'm going to be reading from the AP World History prep materials that coincide and go along with the questions on the CSET for world history as it relates to World War I. A couple of students were looking at the span of information with regard to World War I and World War II and saw all the vocabulary terms and emailed me saying, well, wait a second now, this is a whole lot to get down. I'm feeling overwhelmed. So they wanted to have some other way to review it. So I'm going to go ahead and read from the cards. I could probably ad-lib this and go through the history myself, but I would invariably digress and go off on a tangent. So I'm going to keep it kind of limited to the points on the flashcards that I have here to make sure I'm focused on relevant information that's test prep related. So let's begin with background causes of World War I. Background causes of World War I. By 1900, nationalism was a powerful global force, sometimes urging people to unite for a common purpose, and others acting to break up groups. Ethnic minorities living in multinational empires of the Ottomans and Austria-Hungary were seeking independence. The major industrialized nations of Europe were competing for control of foreign markets and access to materials and resources. Also, an arms race had emerged as these same nations sought to create the world's strongest armies. So obviously this is going to lead into this strong sense of nationalism that the countries are going to actually build up at the same time along with their arsenals. Interesting recipe for war. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, in an attempt to maintain the balance of power, many nations in Europe entered into alliances for protection. The two most significant were the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. So again, let me repeat that part. The Triple Alliance included Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Now that's three countries. Austria-Hungary is not two, it's a unified nation. So Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy are the Triple Alliance, and the Triple Entente includes the following nations: Britain, Russia, and France. So you want to note that in your notes, of course. Triple Entente, Britain, Russia, France. Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Nationalism, militarism, and imperialism combined with a new reality of entangling alliances ensured that even the smallest crisis would lead to war that would envelop the entire European continents. Now, of course, this is going to set the stage for the big event of the assassination of Franz Ferdinand and Gavrilo Princip, a member of the Black Hand, Serbian nationalist group, who's going to try to assassinate him in a comedy of errors, and then of course this amazing twist of fate that's going to put Franz Ferdinand right in front of him after he's escaped the original assassination attempt. If you don't know the history behind this assassination attempt and you're interested, look it up. It's very fascinating. Okay, let's look at the immediate cause of World War I. The crisis, sometimes referred to as the spark that started the war, came on June 28th, 1914, while on a visit to Sarajevo in Bosnia. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated in Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist. Almost immediately, Germany pledged its support to Austria-Hungary. And with Austria-Hungary's declaration of war on Serbia, a month later, Russia mobilized forces against Austria-Hungary in support of Serbia. A few days later, Germany declared war on Russia and then on France. Following the German invasion of Belgium, Britain declared war on Germany. and a world war was well on its way. The isms of World War I include the following: nationalism, militarism, imperialism. They all combined with the new reality of entangling alliances. We already spoke of the alliances, the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. The alliance ensured that the war would involve the entire European continent. Because the house of cards was stacked, if you will, to all fall together at the same time, with the alliances having been made. As soon as a couple of the countries got in any sort of conflict, this was going to push them to back one another up. And because they all had their own nationalist agendas, they already had their own national identity issues primed, along with this increase in military spending and military arsenal. Things were ready to go. The matchbook was ready to be torched up on fire. Okay, next topic, the idea of total war with regard to World War I. When all the nation's resources are dedicated to the war effort on both the civilian and military populations mobilized to defeat an enemy, this is total war. A significant consequence of total war is the purposeful targeting of the civilian populations in the cities where they live. Now, of course, with total warfare, there's really no, as it were, green zone. There's no area or safe zone. There's no civilian areas that are off limits. It's total war against the nation, which includes the non-military targets. The ability for civilians to help soldiers defeat the enemy was emphasized, and efforts were mobilized on the home front. Rationing, propaganda, and increased number of women in the labor force visibly indicated the many ways in which ordinary citizens sought to contribute to victory. So this is a case of rationing was happening. People were dropping off their lead, silver, recyclables, as we call them today, but things like rubber and other. There were meatless Tuesdays and days where you went without food as a nation to try to conserve. Something to be interesting if we were to approach that nowadays, although it's hard to convince people to galvanize around something these days. Although nations had large standing armies, conscription became essential. Now we know what conscription is, I'm sure. Conscription is the mandatory service that is announced by the nation. Countries like Israel have conscription to this day, where it's mandatory that males at a certain age must join the service and have a certain time period, 4, 5, 6 years, where they must serve for that, whether it's peacetime or not. In this case, conscription kicked in. You can think of it as the draft, where everyone's going to be signed up in one way or another. And unlike the draft, where you can try to find a waiver or sign a petition to get out of it, with conscription, you're pretty much in, unless they can find another job for you that is related to the war effort. Might have to break here in a moment and do this in two different sessions, but I'm going to keep this going here. Although nations had large standing armies, conscription became essential, and by the end of World War I, more than 70 million men had been drafted. So that's going to put a lot of boots on the ground, voluntarily or involuntarily. 21 demands. Now, going again on the subject of World War I, what were the 21 demands? In 1915, Japan, at war with Germany, invaded German-held territory in one of China's provinces. Despite China's request that Japan withdraw, Japan issued a secret ultimatum of 21 demands of the Chinese government in hopes of securing control over China. It accepted the 21 demands would give Japan economic and military control over China, although they did not give in to all of the demands. A large part thanks to British intervention, China ultimately agreed to many of the demands, including giving control to the Manchurian railroads of Japan. Although Chinese control was restored in 1921, it is not clear that Japan's desire was to establish a hegemony or a total political and military control of the region in Asia was a goal if they wanted to continue to pursue. I'm going to pause here and come back to you with more on World War II. Please